Hello friends, and welcome to a travel journal with me. Today I will be talking you through how I personally travel journal. So first of all, I tend to kind of organise my days from my trip into little piles of ephemera and photographs that I have collected or printed after the trip in preparation for the spreads. If I'm not entirely sure how I want to organise those spreads, I will also scribble down on a piece of paper how I am going to organise them in my journal. So I tend to have maybe some days where I will have a whole spread dedicated to that day. Maybe it was a busy day or there's just lots of things that I want to talk about. And other days I might just want to mention a couple of things over a few days. So I will tend to kind of squeeze those into one. And here I am just starting by using a map that I picked up. As you saw, I went on a skiing holiday, and that meant that I'm able to use the map in my travel journal, and I do try and do this where possible. I find that if you go and visit somewhere and there is a charity shop or a thrift shop, they do often have old maps of the place that you're visiting. And another great way that I've just realised is on iPhone. I don't know if this is a new update or I just didn't know about it for a very long time, but they basically have an app called Journal, and it's kind of in the phone already, and it automatically tracks where you've been, the photographs that you've taken, phone calls that you've had, and the journeys that you've taken, and it will compile those into days on the journal app so that you can then journal about them in the app. But instead I just use them to kind of organize where I've been, because it's quite difficult when you get back from somewhere to necessarily remember where you've been. So I tend to have a little look through this, have a look at my days, and it's really nice to see as well, if you go on a big walk, it will record your steps and the distance that you've taken. So if you do want to add that into your travel journal, then that's a great way to add a little bit more information. It has the place names, so here I could not remember any of the places, what they were called, because they're in a different language to what I'm used to using. So again, another good way to just jog my memory. I know that a lot of people tend to make notes whilst they're travelling of things that have happened or things they want to write down, but I do find that this app honestly just has everything I need to jog my memory. And because I take a lot of photos and videos anyway, then it also obviously includes those in the day. So I just tend to have a little look through my day on there and then put that into my journal. So as I said, I did start by organising the papers, and then I wrote some little notes to just kind of decide which days I was squeezing into one. And for the first day, I wanted to add my boarding pass and part of the map. As well, I added one of the hotel cards and some fun washi tape that people had sent me, which is very travel themed. And I actually took my journal with me on my trip. I didn't do any journaling as in-depth as this, but I did do a little bit of journaling about my travel day, and I also ended up doing a to be read list as well whilst I was away, so that was in there as well. And yeah, I just kind of, when I went away, I took some stationery with me. I have a sticker release book, so that was a really good way for me to collate different bits of stationery that I wanted to use in my travel spreads. And anything that I didn't use, obviously I was able to use when I came back. So it was really handy having everything there ready to go, so I didn't have to think about what I was going to use, because I do like my travel themes to be as themed as possible to the actual event that happened or the place that I visited. So on the next spread, I wanted to dedicate this spread to Valentine's Day because it was Valentine's whilst we were out, and I bought this special sticker sheet to kind of go with the theme. So I did have that prepared, and I also got some pink paper from Sostrine Green and used some music scraps. And then I use my Instax printer to print most of my photos as well, because I just find that they're really cute in the journal. I like how they're obviously 3D and textured, and when I think of like a travel journal or a scrapbook, I instantly think of Polaroids. So it just feels very nostalgic to use them. Of course you don't have to. I used to just print them on my out my normal printer, and I sometimes used to edit them into a Polaroid frame on the computer so that then when they were printed they did look like Polaroids as well. So you definitely don't need an Instax printer because the film isn't the cheapest thing to buy. And then I also collected a bus ticket from our day and wanted to add that in there. It's always really good to add receipts. It's just trying to remember to keep them. So whilst we were away, my partner kept saying, no, we don't need the receipt. And then I'd be like, no, we do need the receipt because I want to collect them. So he's now learnt to say yes to the receipt from now on when we go on travels so that I can use them in my journal. The way that I tend to organise my travel spreads is I tend to put the photos down or figure out where they're going first because they are usually the main focal point of the spread, and then I will just start to decorate accordingly. And I usually have an idea before I start decorating the spread as to whether I want to do a lot of writing or a little bit of writing, and again that really helps me with the planning stage, because then when I come to make the spread I kind of have an idea on my composition already, depending on how much information and text I want to add to the spread. So for example, on the previous spread I only added a tiny bit of information because I wanted the main focal point to be the ephemera that I collected from the trip, and that way I just used one of the little labels to stick on top, and then I could write a tiny bit of information if I wanted to. Whereas on this spread it was a very busy day and I had a lot of things that I wanted to share in my journal and remember, so for this spread I left a lot more space to write. I also find that using washi samples that people have sent are really good for travel journaling because you can kind of add different washi tapes that you don't necessarily have, so then the spreads are quite unique compared to your more everyday ones. Because in my journal I have, I guess, an everything journal, and in here I have my normal spreads that I just want to create as well as all of my travel spreads as well. So I find that if I use different stationery it helps them to just kind of stand out a little bit more and be a little bit different to all the other spreads. It's also good if you plan on doing some journaling whilst you're on your travels, because obviously taking a washi sample is a lot easier than taking a whole roll of washi tape, and it means that you can take multiple types of tape on your trip rather than just one. If you are somebody that does travel journal whilst you're on your trip, then feel free to add any tips for anybody down below, or even for me, because I find it quite difficult to do it whilst I'm on my travels, because I feel like I'm not restricted, but I feel like I don't have like all my stuff, whereas at home I have my craft room with all my stuff in it, so I feel like the possibilities are endless. Whereas when I'm away I feel like I can't quite make the spread that I want to, because maybe something's happened in the day and I want to tailor the decoration towards that, and if I'm away and I don't have all my stationery stash then I can't necessarily do that. So for me, journaling after is definitely a lot better. I would recommend that basically you do it as soon as possible. If you have a really good memory, then obviously you might not need to. But for me, it's not necessarily that I can't remember stuff, because as I said, the photos and the journal app is honestly a lifesaver for me. It will just remind me of everything. But it's more the motivation to create the spreads. So I feel like if I wait a long time, the time's kind of passed and the excitement to create the spread slowly dies away. And I have done that before, and then when it came to making the spread, I was a bit like, ugh. So I find that as soon as I get back, because whilst I've been away, I haven't been able to craft to my heart's content. And obviously I miss it, and it makes me excited to craft when I get home, so I do tend to do it straight away. This time, whilst I was away, I tried something for the first time, and honestly really happy with how it's turned out and the whole process of it. But I decided to take my traveller's notebook watercolour insert, and I haven't actually used it until this point, but I recently bought a watercolour travel set, which I started a nature journal, which is why I bought it. But then I decided to take it with me on my trip, and I basically spent one of the days just painting different things around the place that I was staying. And then I decided that when I got home, I would cut out the pictures that I painted, and then they would go in my journal. And I have also painted something in the past for my travel journal, which was a trip to Scotland, but I painted that when I got home. So this was my first time painting whilst I was there, and it was kind of like an observational painting, if you like. And I just think it adds something really nice to the spread. I think the texture, I always go on about texture, but honestly, like, texture is big for me. I find that it really adds so much depth and just so much more to the spread. And so I really like the watercolour because you can see all the paint strokes, and as well the actual paper is obviously rather textured because it's watercolour paper. So I added this mountainscape which I painted, which you will have seen earlier in the video of me painting, and I just added it on the side of the spread. Obviously I had to fit it in portrait rather than landscape, but it's fine. I actually really like how it turns out at the end, and I do all the writing off screen, so you'll see the finished spreads at the end and how I kind of added all the text in there. But I do find that the painting element into the travel journal, it just kind of gives me more of a scrapbook vibe, and I don't know, I can't get my words out. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but I just really like it. So it's something that I will probably continue to do. And because I don't actually plan on using my watercolour insert specifically for recording pictures and them staying in there, it means that I'm a lot less restricted in that sense. So I can just cut them out and rip the pages out. And the pages are actually perforated as well, so it's actually really easy to get them out anyway. And it says on the back of the travel watercolour insert that you could rip them out, paint postcards, and then send them to people. So that kind of gave me the idea of ripping them out and including them in my travel journal as a way to kind of remember my trip. Maybe one day as well, I might even paint a whole piece and say that it's a postcard and then post it to one of my pen pals. But we'll see if I actually do that. I also have this little date stamp, and I do think that's really important to include in the spreads. Obviously you don't have to use a stamp, you can just write the date, but obviously including the date in a travel journal is quite important so that you know when you did things, because you might be 30 years down the line and looking at this and showing someone, and obviously you might not quite remember everything. So I do always include the date. For this spread, I wanted to add a little bit of writing, but not too much, which is why there isn't too much space on the spread, and I could just kind of focus on the decoration. I also got these little letter stamps from one of my pen pals' Petal Pages, and she made them herself, and they are so cute. I've been really excited to use them, but I've been saving them specifically for my journal. And they were really small, so I found it quite difficult to stick. I should have used a tweezer. So they ended up really wonky, but I actually really like how it worked out. I like the wonkiness of them. And again, it makes it feel like it's more of a traditional scrapbook in a sense. Here are some of the stickers that I took away with me. So as you can see, I kind of organised some travel style stickers in my sticker release book to use whilst I was away, but I didn't use that many, so now I can just use them on my spreads afterwards. One thing I will mention, and it's more of a question actually, so if anyone knows the answer to this, I don't know if I'm imagining things or if when I travelled obviously on a plane, I had to go through security and my journal went through security, and I don't know if the pictures that were already in my journal faded like the tiniest bit. Sometimes the Instax photos are quite washed out anyway, so I'm not entirely sure if I'm just imagining things or if they have actually kind of been washed out. And I'm pretty sure, well, you used to be able to mention to the security people if there was something that you didn't want to go through. Like, for example, I used to do a lot of film photography, so I used to ask if my film could not go through the machine, or if somebody could hand check it, and they were always fine with that. So if the photos have faded at all, I might have to ask if I can do that next time, although I don't know how much they will actually be okay with that. I'm not sure they're particularly into journaling, so I don't think they'll be too bothered. And then I also painted some other bits on another day. I painted some of the patisseries and one of the cute houses in the village. I'm not an amazing painter, it's more of, I find it very therapeutic, but my actual painting skills are nothing to shout about. But practice makes perfect, so we're going to keep going. And then here I was able to cut out those images from the watercolour page and just stick them on as if they are stickers. And again, it just adds more of like a handmade personal touch, because again, these spreads are very personal to me and it's something that I want to think about fondly. So if I'm adding those on, then it just makes me feel like, I don't know, that the trip is much more well documented. And I also got this really cute little library insert from, they had this little outdoor library which you just went and picked. It was kind of like a voluntary thing. You just dropped books off and then took them, and you could keep them if you wanted to. And somebody had taken one of the books, but then this obviously vintage library card had fallen out of it, so I just kind of took the library card because it was by itself, and obviously the last entry was like 1982, so I don't think anyone's going to be adding any more entries on there anytime soon. So obviously when you are taking things, just be careful to make sure that you're not taking anything that you shouldn't. And if you're not sure, then you can always just ask the places that you stay. Like, sometimes they'll be more than happy for you to take things. It might just end up going in the bin anyway, but if it's something that you're not too sure about, then just ask and someone will obviously just tell you whether you can or not. Although I haven't actually ever got into trouble with taking anything that I shouldn't, so far I haven't had any bad experience with that, only good things so far. I do find that adding more of the thicker items into my travel journal are best being added by double sticky tape, because it just keeps them in, and obviously I want this spread and journal to last, well, in my mind I want it to last a lifetime. Whether it will or not, I don't know, but we're going to give it a go. I also actually ended up saving some of the watercolour wrappers from my painting, so I also stuck some of those in the journal, and you can pretty much use anything as decoration. And I do find that when you're using the travel journal, obviously it might be better to use more found things or things from the trip rather than bought stationery. I don't think there's particularly a right or wrong with that. I guess it just depends how you want your travel journal to be. I know some people make theirs and it's just writing or just drawings, so it's whatever works for you really. There honestly isn't a right or wrong way. I'm just explaining to you how I like to travel journal, in case you also like to travel journal in the same way. So for example, this spread is called Days by the River, so this was a couple of days kind of squeezed into one. days where I spent a lot of time painting. I was sat by the river writing letters to my pen pals and people that had sent me mail in my PO box. So you might get a letter, and if I say that I'm sat next to the river, then you know where I wrote it. I also wanted to use my Ferris wheel press ink as well to do all the writing. And here is the finished spreads, so you can see everything when it's filled in. It looks very different and it just looks finished, and I really like how I organized all these. I think that they look really cute, and I also think it's maybe the most amount of things that I've managed to squeeze into my travel journal in regards to ephemera. Usually I don't have that much stuff that I bring back. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed learning about how I travel journal, and if you did, then please subscribe, comment, and I'll see you in the next one. So thank you and goodbye.